Hi, everybody. I'm Clay Rogers with the Central Valley Water Board, and even though I think we are anticipating a few more people showing up in Rancho Cordova and a couple more joining us on the phone, I think we'll go ahead and get the meeting started just in the interest of everybody's time, because we're already 5 minutes after 10. I don't think this will be an extraordinarily long meeting today, but I do want to be respectful of everybody's time. So we appreciate everybody certainly coming and participating in these meetings. Certainly the panel members for volunteering their time, and members of the public for volunteering their time to come tell us what they think, or share their thoughts with us and listen to the work that we're doing. So I certainly appreciate that. I guess we'll start with some introductions. As I said, my name is Clay Rogers. I'm an assistant executive officer with the Central Valley Water Board, and I'm overseeing this effort for the Central Valley Water Board. And we'll do introduction of Central Valley Water Board staff, and then we'll do introduction of the panel members, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Carl?
Carl Longley, board member, Central Valley Water Board.
Dale Harvey. I'm the oil field program manager for the Central Valley Water Board.
Josh Mahoney, engineer with the Central Valley Water Board.
Ralph Salcides, Central Valley Water Board.
Andy Gorders, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Fresno.
And who do we have on the phone?
Bruce Mackler.
Ken Klock from the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment.
Steve Beam from CDFA is on the phone.
Dave Mazzara, Department of Public Health.
Anybody else? Seeing with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So, I don't know, Dale, you want to go over an agenda review? We already did the introductions, but a little bit out of order.
I'll have Josh take care of that. He's actually got some slides put together, so.
Okay, sounds great.
This is Bruce. Is there any way you can increase the volume on the phone?
We'll look into that, Bruce.
Thank you.
What we'll do, Bruce, is we just have to make sure we're a little bit closer to the microphone here and speaking up a little bit to make sure that it's picked up by the system.
Yeah, so for the agenda today, we're going to have, we already went through the introductions. We're going to talk about the May 9th, 2019 meeting summary. Then we're going to go over a draft report that GSI prepared for the Task 1. And then we're going to talk about the draft white paper that was sent out to the panel as well as the public. We're going to do an update on the food safety project, going over recent crop samples that were collected as well as some of the laboratory results that have come in. And then we're going to do general public comment and then action items and adjourn. So first item, sorry.
Well, just to add to that, do any of the panel members have anything to add or any thoughts about the agenda? Anything else they would like to see or hear?
No, looks fine to me.
All right, well, hearing no other comments, I'll assume that there's no objections. Josh, you want to go over the meeting summary for May 9th?
Yeah, so the last public meeting for the food safety project was on 9 May 2019. Right now we are working on a meeting summary, and we have a draft ready, but we're doing some final edits on that and going to be sending that out to the panel for review and comment. Probably in the past, we've been about 2 weeks, so we'll probably do that again if that's okay. So it'll be a 2-week period for the panel to review any comments and provide any comments or edits that they have for the meeting summary. For those of the public and also the panel members that want to know what happened during the last meeting in May, we do have a video of the meeting available on the food safety webpage. It's a direct link to YouTube, and so it has the full meeting from May, so you can take a look at that if you want in the meantime while we get the meeting summary put together. And that's pretty much a wrap up of the meeting summary for May. Are there any questions or comments about that?
All right, well, hearing that, if we don't have any questions or comments from panel members or any questions or comments from anybody attending the meeting, I don't see any from anybody. We'll go ahead and move on to item number 3, which is developing the surrogate toxicity values for the non-assessed chemicals. And for that, I'm going to hand the meeting over to GSI folks so that they can discuss the work that they're doing.
Before we move on, did we just pick up somebody on the phone?
Yeah, Gabrielle Ludwig from the Almond Board called in.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
I'm gonna give the water board an email again. For those on the, for those who are watching this live via the webinar, just so you know, if you do have any questions you would like to submit to the panel, you can email us at waterboardfoodsafety@waterboards with an s.ca.gov.
And again, did we just pick somebody else up on the phone?
Hi, this is Barbara Peterson.
Thank you, Barbara.
All right, thanks. So I was asked to talk about the development of these ad hoc surrogate toxicity values that we've used to assess some of the previously non-assessed chemicals. I'm going to start with a slightly more-
Bernie, not to interrupt too much, but can you possibly introduce yourself, please?
My apologies. My name's Bernard Beckerman. I'm a senior scientist at GSI Environmental, and we've been asked by the Water Board to assist them in the assessment of produced water and the chemicals that may exist in it. So I just want to, as an overview and reminder, especially to those people who have not been present at these meetings before, is give you an overview of the tasks that we were asked to assist the Water Board with. The first was a hazard assessment and a selection of chemicals of interest from chemicals that are either known additives or are likely or potentially occur in produced water due to naturally occurring processes. And from that, we would conduct in task 2 literature review that focused on those chemicals of interest in the context of the produced water in the agricultural system. And as a third task, assist them in sampling and the chemical analysis of crops that have been irrigated with produced water in the Central Valley. So as an update to where we currently are with task 1, we've submitted a draft final report to the Water Board and Food Safety Panel. Is currently online. This version of the report incorporates comments from both Water Board staff and the Food Safety Panel. Now, we've been asked by the Water Board to focus our discussion here on the toxicologic assessment, and we've given a number of presentations on our approach. I'm going to be focusing here on changes based on some of the comments from the Water Board and the Food Safety Panel, and then discuss shortly the identification of these chemicals of interest. So as a large overview for this toxicologic assessment, and before I sort of discuss our methodology, I wanted to give you sort of a brief overview of the processes and the counting, the assessment that we use to evaluate the toxicity of these chemicals. And so after identifying the list of chemical additives and naturally occurring chemicals, of which there were 399, the first step was to identify published toxicity values, for which we started to develop our database, and then in addition, use published toxicity values for read-across toxicity assessments. In the second step, where there were 271 remaining chemicals, we identified a number that were basically non-toxic. These were constituents in food. They were known to be considered non-toxic, or food additives. They have therapeutic oral use with very limited toxicity. They're destroyed in water, or they're inert. And then this third step is where we'll be focusing most of our discussion here after this major research step So the third step, where there were 200 remaining chemicals, was our major research step, and we tried to develop a database of all the available toxicologic literature on the remaining chemicals. From this, we identified 66 where there was no relevant data, and this represents our largest data gap. And then in the fifth step, where we did our toxicologic assessment of the remaining chemicals, from that we identified 67 chemicals where there was no chronic toxicity, 12 where we had sort of an incomplete assessment due to the available information, and then 51 where we developed these ad hoc surrogate toxicity values. There were also 4 radionuclides. If we do the accounting of these numbers here, it doesn't include uranium, as uranium has a published toxicity value, and the toxicity associated with those are planned to be discussed in task 2. So focusing on step 5, I'm going to talk a little bit about the identification of chemicals that are not chronically toxic, those where we had insufficient information, and those where we developed these ad hoc surrogate toxicity values. The first was to identify those chemicals which may be toxic, but not through the route of ingestion. And examples I give here are butane and crystalline silica. These are toxic through inhalation, but not through ingestion. We have others where we know there's some lack of toxicity, things like polyacrylamide and triterpenes. Polyacrylamide is used for contact lenses and food wrappers. Triterpenes are naturally occurring in plants, and both of these, the evidence suggests that they do not pose any risk through oral ingestion. And then the last method we used was through the use of animal data. And here we identified peer-reviewed academic literature, other reports or studies to make these toxicologic assessments. And to make the assessment, the study needed to satisfy the criteria where there were no effects observed in the study, and the exposures were at least 500 milligrams per kilo per day. Now, the rationale for this is based on our knowledge of the average fruit-vegetable consumption that's reported in the literature. We used it to back calculate the concentration of the chemical that the food would need for there to be required to exceed some exposure level. And this exposure level was derived through the use of this value of 500 milligrams per kilo per day and adding a number of sort of safety factors. These are very similar to the uncertainty factors used for the surrogate toxicity values, and they equate to the uncertainty factors from extrapolating animal to human studies, susceptible populations, and extrapolating subchronic studies to chronic studies. We used a value of 1,000, which gave us a dosage level of 0.5 milligrams per kilo per day. Now, if we use an adult in this example, and this would be for a 35 milligram dose, for adult being 70 kilos, when we use the average consumption, we can back calculate a concentration in food that would require to be at least 110 milligrams per kilo per day to reach that exposure level. And these levels are orders of magnitude higher than we observed in any of the food crops, and we felt confident that this was a conservative method by which we could make that assessment. Now, the second part for step 5 was identification of chemicals with incomplete information. These were through 3 methods. The first being conflicting information. I give the example here of sodium EDTA. We have some studies showing it to be cytotoxic or reproductive or systemic toxicant, but a number of other studies in multiple different animal models have not been able to replicate those findings, and the inability to replicate sort of made that determination difficult. We have some chemicals where there's some suggestive information, but it's not sufficient. Most of these are through cell assays, where they would take some cells, treat it with a chemical, and look at the effects on the individual cells. For things like phenanthrene, we see some potential carcinogenic potential, but there are no evidence in animals or humans. For things like humic acid, which is common in the environment. We see some mechanistic evidence in cells, but again, not in living organisms. And the last method was when we were unable to specifically identify that chemical. Here, the largest and most the largest example here is the aromatic amines, where there are a number that are known to be carcinogens, and there are also a number that are not. And so this inability for us to identify the chemicals sort of put that in this box here. So this brings us to the development of these ad hoc surrogate toxicity values. And I'm going to discuss a little bit the differences in the methods we used previously to that here. I'm not going to go into full discussion of these of the development of these values. We had a number of meetings here that have discussed them, but I want to briefly talk a little bit about the approach that we used. So these are the toxicity values that GSI developed specifically for this assessment to be able to prioritize a list of chemicals, and they weren't necessarily being developed for the use of any standardized risk assessment. We got comments from the food safety panel that suggested we start using California-based guidance. Previous approach used guidance from a number of different agencies, and this sort of streamlined that approach. And the toxicity value takes the form of what OEHA calls a reference exposure level. And this is very similar to exposure levels that are used by other agencies. And these are levels at which you would expect no increased risk in health outcomes if someone was going to be exposed to these for a long period of time. So to develop a surrogate toxicity value, the first step is to identify a study for which animals or humans are exposed at a number of different levels, and the outcomes are either observed or not observed at those levels. The key is to identify what is called the no observed adverse effect level, and in some cases, when effects are observed at all levels, this is called the lowest observed adverse effect level. These levels are then modified by an uncertainty factor, which provide layers of protection for the population. And I'm going to discuss some of the differences that we see between the approach that we used, my apologies, the approach that we used previously to that which we used here. So in the previous approach, we used the exact same uncertainty factors. The differences are in the values of those uncertainty factors. Now, going through each of these individually, the lowest observed adverse effect level of factor, or the extrapolation from the lowest observed effect level to the no observed adverse effect level, is a value of 10, and this is the same between both methods. For the interspecies factor, and this accounts for differences in the way that chemicals are processed, metabolized, absorbed between species. Previously, we had used a value of 10, or previously we'd used a allometric scaling, which adjusts based off the size of the animal, but here we see that the method is streamlined. We have 1 if we have a study that uses human observations, a value of root 10 for primates, which are non-human, and then for all other animals, we use a value of 10. For this interspecies factor, which could be thought of as a susceptibility factor, if we used a human study where it included susceptible populations like children, elderly, those who are sick, we could use a value of 1. If we did not expect there to be any additional susceptibility within the population, we use a value of root 10. And then if we did suspect susceptibility, we'd use a value of 10. Now, one of the larger differences between our methods has to do with the use of the subchronic factor. Previously, all studies that were shorter than 1 year long were considered subchronic, and we added a value of 10, which is very conservative. Here, the California guidance suggests that we base it based off of the estimated lifespan of the animal. And so to give an example as a rat model, which is one of the animals that are used for many of these studies, if a rat is 2 years old, lives to a life of 2 years old, those that are like less than 8%, we're looking at studies that are 60 days and shorter, 8 to 12 or 60 to 90 days, and those greater than 12 or greater than 90 days would be considered a chronic study. Now, the definition finally for the database deficiency factor, because most of these studies used are deficient in their database, we had to come up with a systematic method by which we could make reasonable comparisons within this list of chemicals where there wasn't any previous assessments. And so we defined that by having 3 potential kinds of studies that needed to have been conducted at some point. These included non-cancer studies, carcinogenic studies, and some developmental or teratogenic study. Now, if any one of those studies was not present, we would consider it a deficient database and apply this deficiency factor. But otherwise, we would consider the database to be sufficient enough to make an assessment here. Now, after going through this process, we've developed a database with 122 published toxicity values, 16 toxicity values, and now an additional 51 surrogate toxicity values. We have a total of 189 chemicals that we needed to screen. And to screen these out and identify our chemicals of interest, the first criteria was based off of toxicity. And so those chemicals which had toxicity values or surrogate toxicity values of less than 0.5 milligrams per kilo per day, as we discussed, this is based off this consumption levels, they were retained in our final database. Additionally, to account for some fate and transport processes, those chemicals which are poorly biodegradable in water or inorganic were also retained. The final list included 66 chemicals. 49 of them have published toxicity values. 4 of those use read-across assessments. Here, also 10 were based on the ad hoc surrogate toxicity values, and three of those use read-across assessments. And finally, if we do an accounting looking at how they break down based off of additive or potentially naturally occurring chemicals, we see 40 of them are additive chemicals, and 9 of those are also naturally occurring, and 16 are not used as additives. And so finally, I just sort of wanted to have a brief discussion on where this is moving forward. And these list of 66 chemicals will move into task 2, which is the literature review. Present the outline of our literature review here. In the introduction, and we've discussed in a previous meeting, which will include both the review of conventionally and non-conventionally produced water in the context of agricultural irrigation. The next 4 sections, or 5 sections, will be focused on our chemicals of interest, and when possible, the chemicals with insufficient information to make a determination, or those which represent our data gap, so we have a better idea of where they are in the environment. These include ambient levels, water, air, soil, food, the other sources of these chemicals, whether they be agricultural or otherwise. We have this more detailed discussion of the toxicity, which we've talked about previously. It includes things like carcinogenicity and endocrine disrupting chemicals. And then a discussion further about fate and transport, more about water, soil, and then some of the breakdown products when possible. And then we'll also have, to follow that, a more general discussion of breakdown products, in part because the number of chemicals and our lack of knowledge on the lack of scientific knowledge just generally on this large group of chemicals sort of requires a more general discussion about the potential for these chemicals to break down the environment, the kind of chemicals we might expect. So finally, we'll be discussing generally the plant uptake and when possible, focused on those chemicals of interest. And then finally, discussion about our knowledge gaps. So, thank you. Are there any questions? Comments?
Before we take questions, this is Dale Harvey, Central Valley Water Board. I would like to make one clarification. This document is not posted online. It was sent out to those folks on the LIRIS list, the Food Safety LIRIS list, a link to which I believe is available on our website. And if anybody needs a copy of it, we can send them a PDF, but it is not posted on our website.
Just a second, Dave. Let me ask, are there any panel members on the phone that have any questions regarding the work that GSI and Dr. Beckerman have been doing?
I don't.
Okay, well, Harry,
do I.
No.
This is Bruce. No, I think it's great.
all right. Thanks, everybody on the panel, and we'll go ahead. I think we have a couple questions or comments from the group, and we'll ask them to introduce themselves and ask their questions.
My name is David Onsalabahir, General Manager, Coelho Water District. I had a question on slide 8. It said on the very bottom, 16 are not used as additives. Therefore, they're naturally occurring, or?
That means they're potentially naturally occurring.
That was
Yeah,
my question.
we've not necessarily observed them in water. We don't know if they're necessarily in water, but there is literature suggesting that they might be naturally occurring or found in other produced water.
Do we have any other questions from, Andy has a question. Dr. Gordis.
That slide you had for your uncertainty factors, you said root 10. What did you mean by root 10?
That's the published value through the OEHA guidance. When those values are used, when a root 10 value is used by itself, the suggestion is use a value of 3. But if there are 2 root 10 uncertainty factors, like let's say we had a non-human primate and the study duration was between 8 and 12%, then instead of 9, you would use 10. It's the guidance.
It's different from the square root of 10?
Well, it's the same.
Oh, okay.
That's the same.
All right.
Yeah.
Dr. Gordis asked whether the root 10 actually was the square root of 10, and I think the answer is yes.
Okay, seeing no other questions or comments from people in the crowd, I understand we have a requested email that requested that we post this document on the website. I will state that unfortunately we cannot post it on the website because it has to deal with issues around the American with Disabilities Act and a new law that has gone in effect, and we have not yet got this document in a form that is ADA compliant. And so I think for the gentleman that requested the document, we do have your email. We'll be happy to email a PDF of the document to you.
I have a question. Can you put this Carl only, can you put a short statement on the website simply describing the document and asking people who want a copy of it to send in an email, give them a address to send it to?
Yeah, yes, we can do that, and we will do that, along with other documents. But we're working that all of these documents, and along with everything else that has historically been on our website, is ADA compliant, so that we can put some of that information, because as you may notice, there's not as much information available on the website as there was a few weeks ago. So, but that's not a particularly simple situation, but we're working to get that corrected.
And I might point out, this is a temporary situation, but we do have the state mandate that the website be ADA compliant. And it's taken, as you can guess, a tremendous amount of personnel hours to be able to convert documents to ADA compliance and get them on the website.
We do have another email question that came in. So this is from, this email does not have a person's name on it. It says the oil and gas industry is the only industry in America that is allowed by EPA to inject known hazardous materials, which are unchecked, directly into or adjacent to underground drinking water supplies. Under Step 1, 399 chemicals evaluated. What about so-called proprietary chemicals that are exempted from reporting, such as fracking fluids, otherwise exempted from the Safe Drinking Water Act? How can you manage what can't be measured?
Well, certainly, and this is Clay Rogers from the Central Valley Water Board. The breadth of that question goes far beyond the issues that we're dealing with here today, into well stimulation, hydraulic fracturing issues, and into the underground injection control program. You know, this particular issue is associated with the recycling of water that is unique within Kern County, in that it is very good water quality from a general mineral standpoint that is suitable from the general mineral standpoint to be recycled for use on crops as irrigation water in a very water restricted area. And so for this small area of Kern County where this water is sourced, this primary part of this project is to look at that water, a reporting of all the chemicals that are added through all of the maintenance and operation activities that the oil companies undertake, and that is then used for irrigation water. And as Dr. Beckerman talked about, it's an assessment of all of the chemicals, and we have requested and have gotten certified under penalty of perjury from all of the companies that these are the chemicals that are being used that ends up in this water to be recycled. And so we're going through this effort to make sure that there's not something here that we don't understand, identifying so that we know what we don't know, and identify the data gaps so that we can start to do this, to take a very conservative approach to make sure that there are no unintended consequences from the use of this irrigation water. So the water boards decided, the Central Valley Water Board decided a few years ago that we would undertake this effort. It certainly has not been as fast as we would like for it to be, but good science takes a little bit of time, and we have to work through this. We've been collecting fruit samples and having them analyzed that we'll be talking about here a little bit later in this meeting. And also the assessment of chemicals, and that's the task 1 and task 2 is the assessment of the chemicals, identifying which of these chemicals are potentially problematic and we need more information. Then literature review, which is task 2, and then the fruit sampling, that's task 3, and then we'll talk about the white paper that basically will be the documentary document, or the document that identifies the work that has been completed as we go forward. So we're not delving into what all the chemicals are that are used in well stimulation, because well stimulation is not an activity that goes on in the oil fields where this water originates from. And we're not dealing with the issues of underground injection control. That's a separate program that is overseen by the California Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources under primacy from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, that the Central Valley Water Board and State Water Board are very involved in reviewing that to make sure that our groundwater resources are protected from the underground injection control. So this project is limited to that water that's being recycled for irrigation. Certainly, water board staff are more than happy to talk to folks about the other programs if they have those questions. It just would be a different forum than today's meeting.
And then another email came in. This one is from Justin Bass. It says, did Chevron and the other oil companies disclose the full list of chemicals they use in their oil drilling processes? And then in another email from Justin Bass, he says, can the Central Valley Water Board and the Food Safety Panel disclose to the public the full list of chemicals that Chevron and other oil companies use in their oil drilling processes?
Actually, I believe we do have the full list. It comes not only from Chevron, but also orders were issued to the suppliers to get information that previously was not available because it was considered a trade secret. So we do have the complete listing of the chemicals that are used by Chevron and the other oil companies that are recycling this water. And that list is available. I know we've had it up on the website. Is it up on the website today?
Yes, it is.
So it is still available on the website, and certainly myself and my staff are available if you want to call us and have any questions, or if you look at the information on the website and it generates any questions, we'd be happy to answer those.
I would like to make a clarifying statement, Dale Harvey Water Board. The list of chemicals is for those chemicals used in the fields that are supplying water for irrigation. So it's not a complete list of all Chevron's chemicals, but it is a complete list, we believe, for the water that's being distributed for irrigation, or for the oil fields that produce water that's being used for irrigation.
Okay, I guess we have not gotten any more questions. Certainly, if there are more questions, we'll be happy to answer those as we go through. And I think we'll go ahead and move forward, and we're going to talk about the white paper that staff is working on. I think it's been available to the panel members for a little bit. We also put that document out on the LIRIS list so that folks would have a chance to look at it prior to the meeting. And we'll let Josh Mahoney of our staff talk about that document.
All right. So in June 2017, Water Board staff prepared a draft white paper outline that is also available on the food safety webpage. Basically, what I'm going to be talking about today is another update to this white paper and going over what we've done exactly. So the white paper is kind of an overview of the work being done so far. It's meant to summarize the tasks and the reports that have been completed and that are also in progress right now. We did prepare an updated draft white paper report, and this was distributed to the panel, and we gave them some time to provide any comments, any questions that they may have, and we did get those comments back, and we're able to incorporate those into the most recent version of this white paper. A lot of the feedback that came back from panel members was, like I said, incorporated into it directly. That also is going to spark some conversation today and have us ask some questions of the panel and get a little more direction as to where this white paper should go and some of the direct feedback that was given. So as I said, we have this most recent version. This most recent version is dated August 27, 2019, and it was distributed to the panel and the public via the Food Safety Lyris list. If you are not a member or subscribed to the Food Safety Lyris list, you can send an email to the Water Board Food Safety at waterboards.ca.gov, and I can send you the link on how to subscribe to the Food Safety Lyris list. But that is how it was distributed to the public. And so this is, like I said, the version that you received on the 27th. This is the most recent version of the food safety, the draft white paper. So from the comments that were received by the panel, I was able to put together some questions that I wanted to ask the panel to kind of spark some conversation, and like I said, get some direction as to where we should move forward with the white paper. So there are a number of questions here, and at the end, I'm going to ask that if there's any other comments or questions about the white paper from the panel to ask at that time. Like I said, there are a number here that hopefully will capture some of the comments that were made, but most of the comments that came in from the panel were, like I said, directly incorporated into the document. So if they're not touched here, they probably were already incorporated, and that was done. So the first question for the panel would be, how should the white paper be formatted? Right now, what we're doing is we're kind of putting together a summary of each of the tasks and each of the items that has been worked on and each of the reports, and kind of putting those reports into the white paper as a reference material. And so we're kind of, this is kind of meant to be a summary, and then you can reference the document and get all the content from the report that's been attached in the white paper itself. The other approach is kind of doing more of a detailed analysis of, or detailed overview of each of those reports in the white paper, and therefore making the white paper a standalone document that doesn't include the exact reports. And I kind of wanted to get some feedback from the panel, which direction you think could be more appropriate, and kind of what are your thoughts on that?
This is Gabrielle. I'll take a first stab. My gut reaction is to have a white paper that does a good job of summarizing what the different reports find, sort of basically analyzing it, and then having the reports as appendices, or however you pronounce it, something like that. So that would be just a suggestion off the top of my head.
Thanks, Gabrielle. This is Dale with the Water Board, and I think that's kind of the direction that we've gotten in the past from the panel. We just wanted to see if maybe a more detailed analysis was, appropriate in the white paper itself. Any other panel members have any comments on that particular question or topic? Hearing none.
Okay. So the next question I have for the panel is, how should we incorporate your recommendations and kind of comments on how the water board should move forward within the white paper itself. What we've talked about in the past is any panel recommendations that you have, you would provide them to water board staff, and then we would prepare, some kind of document with it or some kind of paragraph explaining what you were thinking and incorporate that in the white paper as a recommendation by that panel member, and then also get consensus from the rest of the panel regarding that specific comment. Is there another format that we should be using? Do you want to prepare your exact recommendations and incorporate it that way? I mean, what is some feedback as far as how do we kind of incorporate your recommendations and your thoughts for the white paper?
Well, it sounds like Dr. Gordis.
It would have been nice if you provided these questions to us a couple weeks before, so we have some time to think about it. Because I feel like I'm put on the spot right now.
Yeah,
and I think the others may feel the same way. My understanding is the consultants are preparing the reports for task 1 and 2 and 3, and once all those reports are complete, then you're going to.
Hey, Andy, can you talk up?
My understanding that the consultants are going to complete task 1, 2, and 3, and once all those reports are complete, the white paper would basically summarize all that information and then bring together the recommendations.
Yeah, Andy, Dale Harvey Water Board. I think that's a good understanding, and our intent was not necessarily to try and put you on the spot today. And any comments that the panel has on this most recent draft, I mean, this isn't the final. Obviously, we'll consider them if you want to email them in at a later date kind of thing. We're hoping a couple, 3 weeks would be good so we can start plugging away on the information that we do have in front of us, but obviously we're waiting for additional information as well.
This is Ken Clark. I was thinking it would be nice if the white paper, or I guess the white paper or an appendix of the white paper would summarize the most significant comments of the panel, and then we could review the drafts, and if any individual panel member felt that one of their significant comments were missed, we could add that in. But just the comments, I would say that resulted in significant changes in direction or significant additions to the white paper.
Thank you. Are there any other comments regarding this question? Otherwise, I'll move to the next one. All right, hearing none. So next, one of the comments for the white paper was that there should be some additional topics of discussion, mainly in the introduction of the white paper. Some of those topics of discussion were as a section for oil field additives. Another section was asked to be for treatment of produced wastewater, and another one for discussing the quality of produced water. These were just 3 of them that were recommended, like I said, as part of the comments, but are there any other sections or any other areas that you feel should be expanded on in the white paper, or that you thought were just missed, or can we get any feedback on that?
Again, this is Dale Harvey with the Water Board, and if panel members do have comments or questions regarding this, feel free to go ahead and send those in to us via email, and we'll take a look at them as well.
That's pretty much all, I guess. So that's pretty much all the questions that the main comments that came in that we weren't able to directly incorporate into this most recent version of the draft white paper. Like I said, a lot of the comments they were all great. We were able to understand them and kind of expand on what people were asking of us, and also look at some different ideas as well. Are there any other comments or issues that kind of come up since you've had time or had a little bit of time to look at the most recent version? Any other issues or like I said, comments or edits that you'd recommend? All right. Well, hearing none, we're going to move forward with adding those sections into the white paper. It's going to be a new section for oil field additives, treatment of produced water, and quality of produced water. I'm also going to prepare an outline for how the white paper should be formatted, as far as kind of a summary versus a detailed analysis approach, and then also kind of a brief overview of how we're going to incorporate panel recommendations. I'll get that to the panel and see if there's any additional comments or questions from there, and that'll probably be sent out maybe about a week or so. And so it'll be about 2 or 3 weeks to respond and kind of go over the topics that were talked about today to give you more time and see if there's any other issues that you have identified in the white paper. But that pretty much sums up the draft white paper review.
Thanks, Josh.
So-
Are there,
Another couple clarifying comments, Dale Harvey, Central Valley Water Board. This was also sent out on the LIRIS list to the public for those who are on the LIRIS list. My understanding is the current draft that we have is pretty close to being ADA compliant, and once it is, we will put it up on the food safety website. Shouldn't take more than a week or so.
that being said, I'll go ahead and ask the people that are here in attendance if anybody has any questions or comments that they would like to add regarding the food safety outline and primarily the written parts that are part of the introduction. Seeing none, I think we'll move on to item number.
Sorry, we just got an email.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. So this is an email from Justin Bass, and he says, is Chevron and the other oil companies using water for well stimulation? Where does the water come from?
Again, Mr. Bass, I mean, we'll be happy to talk about that question. I know that there is a report coming out from the Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources, I believe, related to AB 1281, I believe is the correct number, that talks about the use of oil field waters and recycling and talks about water that goes to these different sources. And I think that document is supposed to be out relatively soon. I believe that it's being worked on by the California Council of Science and Technology. I do not know when the publication of that will be, but that may talk about that particular item. So that is outside the scope of the food safety issue. And so, like I said, we'd be happy to talk about that offline, but it's outside the scope of this document. And as far as the sources of water, I think there's reporting that may be available on the Dogger website that may help to answer that question, but I don't think the water boards have the specific answer about where the water comes from that is used by companies that are doing well stimulation.
And did we pick somebody else up on the phone?
Do we have any other email questions?
No.
Okay, well, no questions in the audience or on the email or from the panel members. I guess now we'll move on to item number 5, which is the food safety project. And I think Dr. Beckerman is going to give us
Oh, so we're kind of.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're kind of doing this together a little bit. So, yeah, GSI will be they'll be talking about the crop sample results. Water Board will be doing an update on the most recent sampling. This is Josh Mahoney with the Central Valley Water Board. So to give a most recent update for 2019 crop samples, In February, we collected samples of citrus, and then we collected in May samples of cherries, and most recently we did carrots in July. We have not received results back for the July samples. That's still with the lab, but we're hoping to get those shortly. Results for the other ones have come in, and we're reviewing them right now. For the July samples, we switched laboratories, and that was due to some delayed. They were delayed coming to us, the water board, so we kind of switched laboratories to expedite that process, and that's discussed in the white paper as well. So we went from WEC laboratories and we switched to agriculture and priority pollutants laboratory, short Apple, and this is located in Clovis, California. And so the same process is still this, staff retains the samples throughout the entire sampling process, and then now we're directly transporting those samples to the lab. And so that's kind of the most recent update on the crop sampling report, or crop sampling. And then GSI will have an update on crop sample results.
This is Bernie Beckerman from GSI. I was just going to give you a very brief update on where things are with the data that have been collected from the crop sampling. So we currently have data from a number of crops: almonds, apples, carrots, cherries, grapes, garlic, lemon, mandarins, navel oranges, Valencia oranges, pistachios, and tomatoes. All this data are, except for the pistachios, we're looking at it in earnest and developing a report which will be forthcoming. Pistachios are just currently undergoing some quality control. Sampling has not yet been completed, as Josh said, for the carrots. This happened in July of 2025.
Hi there, this is Irina joining.
Who is this?
This is Irina.
I think you have the wrong conference line. This is for a food safety meeting.
Ah, you are right, but this is the number I got sent. Okay, I'll check back in. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
So once we receive samples from, or the analysis results from the carrot samples, I think that will have completed our database of crop sampling data. So currently have 11 crops with sample results, and as a general summary, the results don't suggest any significant differences between the produced water samples and the conventionally irrigated samples. Over the entire set of data, we have 8 different metals that have been observed and 6 organics. Metals include antimony, barium, cadmium. Chromium was only observed in a control sample. There's copper, nickel, strontium, and zinc. And as far as the organics, we have 1,4-dioxane that was only observed in a control sample, acetone, acrolein, ethyl acetate. The methanol was observed in a treated sample for these 11. The methanol has been observed in other samples before, and also p-isopropyl toluene. So overall, there's no apparent evidence of a systematic difference between the treated and controls for both metals and organics. If we do a analyte to crop comparison, so let's say a carrot sample for zinc compared to in a treated versus a carrot sample in zinc in a control. If we do comparisons for all of the analytes where we've actually seen detections above the non-detection limit, we have 22 of 35 of these comparisons show very slightly higher metal levels in the treated, so there's 63%, but the differences are of no toxicologic relevance. There's maybe like 6 to 10% difference. And then with the organics, doing these same comparisons, we have 11 of 28 comparisons showed slightly higher organics in the treatise, is a little less than 50%. And again, there's no difference in the toxicologic relevance of these. Now, the only thing of real note are that in some of the control samples, we saw 1,4-dioxane. We haven't seen that in any other sample. And then the acrolein levels in one control sample of garlic was very high. And it's unclear why it was so high, but acrolein is a known chemical in many vegetables, fruits, and roots.
Dr. Beckerman, I just want to add one point of clarification for everybody in the room and on the phone is that if you haven't followed this in the past, when we talk about control samples, we're talking about samples collected from fields that have not been irrigated with produced water. So it's only other sources of water. And when we talk about treated, what we mean is that there is some portion of the irrigation is made up of produced water that is applied and used for the irrigation water. So treated means that there is produced water in it. Control means there is not.
Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are.
Yeah, are these lab results available on the web?
Dale?
Not presently. Again, it gets back to the compliance with the ADA requirements.
Yeah, okay, because the first time you had lab results, you sent them to the panel. I haven't seen results since then from, the direct lab results.
We can provide those to you, Dr. Gordish.
Oh, and then one more clarification question. Is this year 3 of crop sampling?
I guess officially, yes.
Okay.
3.5.
Yeah, we have results for 2016, 17, 18, and 19.
So it'll be year 4.
Yeah, depending on the crop, but yes, we have 4 years.
Do we have any questions from any of the panel members on that short update? Hearing none, I'll ask any members in the audience have any questions regarding the results? Seeing none, and then I'll ask Josh whether we've received any email questions.
We have. So Justin Bass says, can we give the water to farmers directly instead of letting Chevron use it for well stimulation and then recycle it secondhand to the farmers? Then there's another email from Justin Bass. Please ask, can we give the water to the farmers directly? And oh, sorry, that's the same one, just asking it again. Sorry, there's another email. So there's another email from Justin Bass for the public record. I don't know if it's the same one. Sorry. Yeah, that's all.
Okay,
sorry.
I have to confess a little bit that I'm a little bit confused. But what I think the question is, and Mr. Bass, if I get this wrong, please email and clarify it. Is that your comment is that the water that oil companies may use for well stimulation or other activities, can it be provided directly to farmers? And that particular question again is a little bit outside the scope of this project. This is about water that oil companies collect when they remove the oil from it, the product that they sell. And this remaining product is a good enough quality that it's suitable for recycling for use for this particular activity, which is the irrigation of crops. So nobody else has control of the produced water other than the oil companies, and then the delivery to the irrigation districts or the entities that then provide it for the farmers to use as part of their water supply. So I don't think I can really answer that question other than to say I think you're comparing, it's a little bit of a comparison of apples and oranges, and that, you know, the water that may be being used for well stimulation may be recycled from oil fields. It may be coming from other sources, but it's a considerable distance, 30, 40 miles away, at least probably, from where this water is produced to the areas where hydraulic fracturing is being conducted, just because of the nature of the geology and the type of oil recovery that's completed in those rocks. The rocks in the Kern River oil field and on the eastern side of the valley are not suitable for fracking. They're not the type of rocks that you would do that to stimulate production. So our understanding is that fracking has not been done in this area, and because the rocks that contain the oil are not really suitable, we do not expect that hydraulic fracturing is something that would be produced in this area. So, you know, what the sources of water are or how it gets moved around for well stimulation isn't really a part of this particular project. Well, seeing no other questions, I guess that completes item number 5 on the agenda.
Sorry, one more email just came in.
Oh, okay.
So this is from Justin Bass. It says, clarification, the oil companies need fresh water for well stimulation, right?
You know, I'm not an expert on the source of the water that they use for well stimulation and what the quality of that water would be. I would have to actually refer you to the Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources or the oil companies themselves to talk about the quality of the makeup water that they use for their stimulation fluids and what it starts out as. I don't really know the answer to that question. I'm sorry. Okay, I think that addresses item number 5 then. So we'll go to item number 6, which is general public comment. If anybody from the panel or on the phone or in the audience, both here and online, have any general comments that they would like to make, we'd be happy to attempt to answer those or accept the comment and incorporate it in future work that we do. Not hearing anything from the panel or in the audience, and I'll ask Josh if we have any emails. We don't. I guess that completes that. So Dr. Gordis has a question, so.
Yeah, I'd like to have a discussion if these public workshops are worthwhile, because 5 of us here drove 7 to 8 hours from Fresno. Dan's driven farther from Bakersfield. When we first met, you know, we had a room full of public people participating, and now just a handful. I'm the only panelist that physically showed up today, so I'd like some feedback from the few in the audience here as who you are and why you came, if you think it's worthwhile continuing these public workshops.
And I would also ask if the folks online would have that particular question. I will just tell you, I'll be the first to chime in on this one, that to be honest with you, my life would be easier if we didn't have the public workshops, and didn't go through this effort. But I will also say that, it is the desire of the regional board members and the regional board staff, I believe, and the executive officer, that we conduct these things in an open and transparent way, that we keep the public informed of what we're doing. This isn't something that we're doing behind closed doors and not accepting public comment. And even though we may not have a whole lot of interaction, my personal opinion, and we have the chairman of our board, Dr. Longley, here too, perhaps he would like to weigh in, but my personal opinion is this is a process that we need to go through. The panel members certainly have the option to participate by phone if need be. But I want us to do this in an open and transparent way so that members of the public have the opportunity to weigh in, tell us what they think, tell us if they think they're wrong, and not do this outside of public view.
Yes, Carl Longley, board member of Central Valley Water Board. I was one of the board members, one of the two board members designated to follow this study and to attend meetings when possible. And I really think that, and there are a lot of personal reasons why I could have not attended today, one of them being some particular serious medical problems my wife is facing. But I found a way around that, and I'm here because I think these meetings are important. And I think what we might be seeing is simply an artifact that this is August. I know that school started many places, but August is a bad time to have meetings often, to get people there. And I know that some of the panel members, certainly Will Stringfellow, are traveling now. And part of that, certainly not entirely that, but part of that, once again, is the time of the year. Find real bad weather when travel's bad, we tend to get more people. So I think there's true value, and as Clay Rogers pointed out, this has to be a transparent process. If people don't show up, and we've encountered that as a board from time to time, we still have the obligation to have this in front of the public. Certainly, there apparently have been some people online today. We don't have a true count of how many folks are really participating, but I think we have to give folks the opportunity to either show up here or to be online, and certainly their feedback is very important to us. So
This is Barbara Peterson. And I have been online, so I consider that like participating, and I appreciate the ability to do that. And it also gets me focused to read things and do things that maybe a secondary function of the meeting. Deadlines slip otherwise.
That also leads me to another question is, this is a Kern County project, and Bakersfield is the main city down there. It's an awful long distance for people to travel like Dan, and so that's one question I've had is maybe that's one reason why we're not getting public participation, because it's so far away.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, and one of the reasons that we hold it here is because we can get Kern County participation by being online, but the panel members, most of them are from this area and are volunteering for this, so to speak, to get them into the Kern County area often enough becomes a logistical issue that we probably can't address satisfactorily. With that said, it's My point of view is that I think it is appropriate if we do have one panel meeting in the Bakersfield area as we get near the end of this, allow people for their input.
And I will also add that, we're not opposed to having panel meetings. It's a little bit closer to Fresno for myself and my staff. It's a little bit further for some of the consultants. And if participation is primarily by phone, then where the panel members are located may be less of an issue. I will say that, any place we have the meeting, we probably should make sure that we have web access and that we can transmit the item over the web so that those people that are not capable of travel but have web access still have the ability to participate, even if not directly. I will also add that the Central Valley Water Board will have a meeting next April that is scheduled to be held in the Bakersfield area. We don't have the exact date or location yet. That'll be determined, the date will be determined at an upcoming board meeting where we set the calendar for 2019. And once we have that specific date, then we'll pin down exactly where that board meeting will be held. But our anticipation is to have a draft white paper done with the Task 1, Task 2, Task 3 results in draft form by the end of the calendar year. So that's about 4 or 5 months, 4 months. That's our anticipation. So the pace is picking up as we start to finish some of the different tasks, and we can get beyond the introduction and actually get into the meat of the white paper. My anticipation is that we'll have 1 or 2 panel meetings left in the public, probably 2 more, and then we would have an information item at a minimum. Maybe it's even a consideration for the board to accept the white paper. However, we're going to do that, and I don't know that we've laid that out exactly, but to present the results to the board in a public meeting, which would be held in Bakersfield, certainly we would enjoy any participation by the panel members to put their viewpoints at that public meeting that is the board meeting. But my anticipation is we will do that in Bakersfield and expose that. But, we'll talk to staff here and see, potentially if we can hold one of the panel meetings in Bakersfield between now and the end of the project.
Well, you said something that's very important, that we need facilities equivalent to what we have here. And if that's not available in the Bakersfield area, then we might consider Fresno as an alternative.
Yeah, the worst problem being is that in Fresno, our office does not have the capabilities to do this. We can't webcast it from Fresno.
I just learned something.
We got a question online. So Justin Bass has submitted 5 emails with 5 different questions. I'm going to say 2 of them right now just because they're related to this issue that we're talking about right now. So 2 of his emails say, please have a workshop in Southern California where the majority of the population of California live. And then the other one says, clarification, please have a food safety meeting in Southern California where the majority of the population is. Many of us cannot drive 400 miles to attend the food safety panel meeting near Sacramento.
Well, I will say that I appreciate the comment. Southern California is outside the jurisdictional area of the Central Valley Water Board. We cover the drainages of the San Joaquin and Sacramento rivers. And so I don't see the Central Valley Water Board holding a meeting in Southern California. I understand the issue that a significant portion of the population is in Southern California, but you know, by that particular argument, I could say is that commodities are shipped worldwide, and I could have a food safety meeting in Philadelphia.
No, but I think that's an argument for having a meeting in Bakersfield.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll try to go to Bakersfield, which will be significantly closer to Southern California than where we currently are. But again, that's part of our intent of providing web access so that if travel becomes difficult because we can't be in all places, we're more than happy to, try to make this as easy as we can for folks to participate. You said Mr. Bass had a couple other questions, at least.
Yes, he does.
Why don't we go ahead and see if we can deal with those before we go to Mr. Gore?
Okay. So one of the emails says, because we are in a fossil fuel caused climate, sorry, email popped up blocking it. Because we are in a fossil fuel caused climate crisis, can we give the fresh water to the farmers and not give fresh water to oil companies? And then another email says, clarification, Dogger and the oil companies will not answer my questions. And then in another email it says, can we have Dogger and Chevron and the oil companies at the food safety meeting?
Certainly, I'll try to answer those. And if you asked whether we can have Dogger, Chevron, and
Other companies.
other companies at the food safety meeting, and I guess Bob Gore here, who represents the California Independent Petroleum Association, is here along with other folks. We do have representatives from Coelho Water District in the room. Chevron is typically a participant here in person, but I don't see that person in attendance today. So typically they are participating. So I think we have those issues there because this is an issue that's, there's a wide range of interests that are concerned about this particular issue. What was the other question? Let's go through them one by one, Josh, so I don't.
So the first one was, because we are in a fossil fuel climate crisis, can we give the fresh water to the farmers and not give fresh water to the oil companies?
That's a question for a different venue than the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. We deal with water quality, permitting, and effects from activities that either recycle or discharge produced water. We are not responsible for, water supply or who gets water.
Well, we don't have the legislative authority to do that.
Yeah, we don't have the authority to do that. That's more of a water rights and perhaps a Department of Water Resources issue, but it's outside the jurisdiction of the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board.
Okay, and then the other one was Dogger and the oil companies will not answer any questions.
I don't have a response for that other than I apologize for that as a state employee, but I cannot control what other agencies do. All I can tell you, Mr. Bass, is that when you have questions, the Central Valley Water Board, for the people that I'm responsible for, we will address your questions as best we can.
Yeah, then we got one more. Sorry. Justin Bass again, asking, please ask Clay Rogers, will you find out about the fresh water used by Chevron and other oil companies for well stimulation? Is it possible to give that fresh water to the farmers directly instead of letting Chevron and other oil companies use it and recycle it secondhand to the farmers?
I mean, the Central Valley Water Board does not collect that information, and we don't have the legal authority to even asked for that information, I don't believe. That may be information that the Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources, the issue of can you give it directly to farmers and not give it to an oil company? That's more of a policy, political question that is outside our jurisdiction, so I can't weigh in and I don't even have a comment regarding that because it's outside the issues that the water board can deal with. And so, as unsatisfying of an answer as that may be, it's really the only answer that we have is that.
Well, this is Carl Longley. This certainly it's not within the purview of the Central Valley Water Board, but the Mr. Bass, the folks that you should speak to directly would be Water Rights Division in the State Water Board. Who's the? I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Bechtel's the director of that then.
Yeah, Justin, that is Eric Ekdahl, EKDAHL. He is the Deputy Director of the Division of Water Rights at the State Water Resources Control Board.
Hi, my name is Robert Gore. I'm speaking as a retired state employee. To answer the panelist's question directly, I conducted public hearings from Chula Vista to Crescent City for two large state departments, Corrections and Caltrans, where I was a senior executive and served two governors. I learned a long time ago not to temporize over how many people show up and what their questions are or issues. You just never know. And the transparency, like Carl said, is the purpose of it. If it's sparsely attended, so be it. It's the journey that counts, and the fact that this is taking place speaks loudly to laudable California virtues. So don't worry about it.
And then we got another email. This one is from Jane Subi. It says, Dear Food Safety Panel members and staff, CCOF agrees that the public meetings are worthwhile, and we greatly appreciate the opportunity to weigh in remotely. We will take this opportunity to advocate that some of the testing being conducted be done on soil to determine if irrigating with produced water impacts soil quality. We have mentioned this before. We feel free to follow up for further information. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just thank you for the comment. That is, soil testing is something that will be discussed in the white paper. But thank you for the comment, and we'll get back with you if we have any questions.
Good morning. I'm Brian Pellins with California Resources Corporation. I would just like to say that these public meetings are indeed valuable, so we should continue having those for transparency's sake. With regard to Mr. Bass's questions, the water use data for all oil and gas companies is collected from SB 1281. It's available on Darga's website. I provided Mr. Bass the link to the data, so he has it, it's available. Further, CRC is proud to be a net freshwater producer solely due to our water reduction efforts and projects like this that produce agricultural water that's given to farmers. Thanks.
All right, if we have nobody that has other comments, nothing coming in on the email, nobody in the room or on the phone, then why don't we talk about action items?
Ralph, why didn't you go ahead and see what you got, and I'll see what I got. Josh can see what he's got, and we'll hopefully capture them all.
Okay.
The May 9th, 2019 final summary was sent to the food safety and has a 2-week review and should be online shortly thereafter, after approval. The final report to the Water Board Food and Safety Panel for review was sent to the Food Safety Lyris list. And Dale has mentioned if you'd want to be added to the Food Safety Lyris list, to contact the State Water Board. We had a request for the GIS report to be put on the web, and due to it not being ADA compliant, it will not be added onto the web at this time, but we're working on it to become ADA compliant. And it was also mentioned that if you email the Water Board, we'll send you a PDF of the document. In a week, a new set of questions and comments will be sent to the Food Safety Expert Panel, connecting to the white paper for questions and comments. And that is all the comments I have on that.
Okay, so I think, so basically we're going to make the ADA, the current version of the ADA, or the white paper ADA compliant. We'll post it on the website. We're going to get the GSI report to those folks that asked for a copy. It was sent on the Lyris list. Mr. Borkovich from the State Board also provided what may be a workaround. We may be able to post a link to GSI's website if they publish it or post it, but I will check with our folks to make sure we can do that. And then the other one that I have is that staff will provide within the next week or so the current packet of lab reports that we have for the most recent sampling to the panel members and the folks that are associated with the project, so they can take a look at it. Josh, did you have anything else?
No, that covers it.
Well, I just have this, Clay Rogers, I have one thing to add, and that is that we will investigate the possibility of having a food safety meeting in the Bakersfield area. And one of the future meetings, we will do that. The other thing is that my anticipation is that we would have another food safety meeting, probably sometime mid to late November, avoiding the holidays. And we'll look at the possibility of having that in Bakersfield. Staff hasn't scheduled that. We will be working with the panel members to identify what their availability is and guide us on when we'll have that. By then, the white paper should be starting to be much more substantial than it is today. And so the majority of that meeting will probably be talking about the white paper and starting to talk a little bit more in detail about the comments from the panel members and what your recommendations are for this particular activity, how we look at it in the future, and start to work on this. And then, again, I just want to add that my anticipation is that, by spring, this project really will be wrapped up, this initial portion of the project anyway. We'll have to talk about, what happens in the future and future activities, particularly if something was to change from how it's done today. Is there something that needs to be done? And certainly we'll look to the panel to provide that insight. But we really are starting to look at the possibility that my guess is there's about 2 more public meetings, maybe 3, and then my anticipation is we'll be talking about this item at not a panel meeting, but at our board meeting that'll be in Bakersfield. and I believe it'll be early April of 2020. So, and hopefully by then, with much appreciation from the water board to the panel members and the public for your participation, we'll probably be looking at having completed the white paper and moving on. So with that, unless somebody else has something they would like to add, Dr. Gordis?
Yeah, Dale informed me earlier that, he'd send the analytical lab results to the panel.
Yeah, I thought I captured that.
Yeah, but it wasn't, I didn't catch it in my notes. I don't
Okay,
remember.
no, yeah, we will send those to you within the next week or so.
And I'll just say that I want to thank everybody for taking the time to participate, to ask your questions. Thank you, and we'll go ahead and adjourn until the next meeting, which the date has not been set yet. Thank you.